Hi, I'm Pastor Harry Zanting, one of the pastors in the First Christian Reformed Church in Red Deer, Alberta. This series of teaching videos on the Ten Commandments rose out of an adult education class at our Foundations Night that began in the fall of 2020. But because of COVID restrictions, which have changed our lives in many ways, we were unable to continue in person. But we can continue to learn and reflect on the Ten Commandments in this way. Almost all of the videos are recorded in my living room, and for a reason. The Ten Commandments are not just rules handed down to make life a burden and difficult. They are meant for everyday life, and they give us guidance on how to live life well with each other, with the creation, and with God. It is how everyday life is meant to be lived. And when we follow these words from God, our lives thrive and our relationships thrive. With that, let's take up the next commandment. Well, hello. We're back again, continuing our series on the Ten Commandments. Today we're looking at the fifth commandment. Honor your father and your mother so that you may live long in the land the Lord your God is giving you. I want to begin with a story, all right? And it comes from actually Genesis chapter 9. Noah, there's just been a flood, and Noah and his family have come out of the ark, and it goes like this. Noah, a man of the soil, proceeded to plant a vineyard. When he drank some of its wine, he became drunk and lay uncovered inside his tent. Ham, the father of Canaan, saw his father's nakedness and told his two brothers outside. But Shem and Japheth took a garment and laid it across their shoulders. Then they walked in backward and covered their father's nakedness. Their faces were turned the other way so that they would not see their father's nakedness. When Noah awoke from his wine and found out what his youngest son had done to him, he said, "Cursed be Canaan." Well, what do you think of that story? It's actually an example of honoring and dishonoring a parent. Dishonoring by Ham in viewing his naked father and then by telling his brothers. In doing so, he further shames his father. Shem and Japheth, on the other hand, honor their father despite the shameful and foolish actions of their parent. Here, honor is not simply obedience and respect, but also caring for the parent, doing something about their needs. Now, the dishonoring that Ham does is so significant that Ham's child is cursed. That's Canaan. It affects future generations, which suggests that when you honor or dishonor parents, it will go well or not so well with you in the land for a long time. Now, if you want a positive example of honoring a parent, you might read the book of Ruth. In it, Ruth serves as an excellent model as she honors her mother-in-law. Not just her mother, but her mother-in-law. Now, the fifth commandment serves as a transition commandment between the first part of the law, the religious commandments, having to do with our relationship with God, and the second part, the ethical commandments, having to do with our relationship with neighbor. There's been a fair bit of discussion as to which part, which table of the law this command belongs to. It could be the first of the second table because we begin our relationship with other people first with parents and family. That's where we first encounter what it means to love our neighbor, and that's where we learn how to do that. We learn relational qualities about authority, respect, love, protection. We learn how not to treat people, such as the following commands develop. In some way, the fifth commandment is then foundational to the rest of the ethical commands. If it falls apart there, then it will probably fall apart in the rest. If we do not honor parents, then it becomes unlikely we will honor anyone else. However, there's also a number of reasons to include it as part of the first table having to do with God. One of the reasons is it's one of analogy. As God fathers creation and people, so parents give birth to children. So there is a sense that we must give honor to parents just as we do to God who made us. Another has to do with authority. We'll look a little bit at that later in the catechism, but parents have an authority over children, and so it calls for submission and obedience from those underneath. Just as God has ultimate authority over all and calls for submission and obedience. Now, we do need to be a little bit careful here in equating parents with God. God is God, but parents are still fallen human beings. So we cannot say that parents are God. There's also a structural connection to the previous commands. This command continues the use of the phrase, the Lord your God, which is found in the previous 4. After this command, the phrase is no longer used. Furthermore, it's closely connected in structure to the command on keeping the Sabbath. Both are positive commands, and the only two which are so. Both contain a motivation clause encouraging obedience. Here it is the possibility of long and a good life. In Deuteronomy, both have the phrase, as the Lord your God commanded you. And then there's a thematic connection. First, there's the idea of honor, or to fear, as in to revere something, which is usually assigned to God, but is also assigned here to parents. And a second theme, according to Martin Buber, it has to do with time. Keeping Sabbath is about keeping time with God, devoting time to a relationship with God, as in a day, chronological time. The fifth has to do with time in the sense of time over generations. The enduring of life and time in the succession of generations. All right, let's look at the commandments themselves, the commandment itself. In Exodus 20, it says this, honor your father and your mother, so that you may live long in the land the Lord your God is giving you. Deuteronomy is slightly different. It says, honor your father and your mother. It adds, as the Lord your God has commanded you, so that you may live long, and then it adds, and that it may go well with you in the land the Lord your God is giving you. Why the difference? Well, in Exodus, they immediately come out of Egypt. They've just become a nation. Deuteronomy is a generation later, and so they are reminded that the Lord commanded it on Mount Sinai. And then, given the wilderness wanderings, having it go well with them, that would make sense. Remember that a generation died in the wilderness because of rebellion, and the children lived with what the parents had done. And as they're about to enter the promised land and settle in, they need more than living long, but also that it will go well with them there. Now, the command itself is a vague and broad command, and I think that's intentional, to allow for a broad range of honoring. The aim is broad rather than narrow. Now, we would probably prefer it to be black and white so we can be specific and we can know the boundaries of what to do or what not to do. But I think the heart of the command is that it's more than behavior or specific action, but it includes an inner attitude and disposition. The Hebrew word honor, kavod, means to be heavy, weighty. We are to treat parents with a weightiness, a seriousness. That's kind of an inner disposition, isn't it? We are to treat them with glory, really. However, I should say, though, that disposition is manifested in actions. But it's up to us to figure out what it means to honor someone specifically. So the purpose of the command is to give God's pattern of conduct, not the details. Now, here's what I think. As we get to know God better, as in the first commandments, we may have a better idea of how to fulfill this command with our parents. So honor. What does that mean? Joan Chittister calls this the law of caring. It's in terms of caring for our parents. Even honoring them in death, as they do in the Jewish tradition of sitting Shiva. It's a week-long period of mourning for first-degree relatives such as parents. It demands that we respect the past. So we owe our parents a debt for giving us birth, for raising us. We honor those parents who are parenting our souls to wholeness, really. They did what they were able to do in making us who we are, and the rest we are meant to do for ourselves. Honor requires reverence, obedience, thanksgiving or gratitude. Now the obedience part, that changes as we age. We obey as children, but as we become teenagers or young adults, we begin to separate our identity from them, so we test their will a little bit, we form our own identity. And then as adults, it's more about respect, taking time for them, helping them, caring for them. More than likely, this command, by the way, was written for adult children. So obedience may not be the main issue here. Now, even if parents are poor parents, we can honor them by living well ourselves. We can honor them by being patient with their failings. We can honor them by doing what is right even if they did what was wrong. When I do premarital counseling, I usually kind of make a joke, but I say marriage is for working through what our parents did to us. And I think there's some truth to that. But we work through it and we forgive them. We do things differently. We continue to respect them. We help them. We honor them as human beings created in the image of God. And I guess in a sense, really, we love them, perhaps not so much because they are parents, but because they are our neighbors, the first ones that we start out life with. So we love them in the ways that the rest of the Ten Commandments instruct us to do, and in more ways. Perhaps implied in this command is the parents' responsibility to raise their children well. This is the family kind of command, right? Ephesians 6 verse 4 says, "Fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord." Colossians 3 verse 21 says, "Fathers, do not embitter your children, or they will become discouraged." Now in Ephesians, it's in the context of Ephesians 5:21, which starts that whole section and says, "Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ." Now, no parent is perfect, and there may even be abuse, but we submit, which does not mean become a slave, but rather we seek to do what we can for the benefit, for the good, for the strengthening of the other. Parents for children, children for parents. Now you may have noticed that the commandment says honor your father and mother. Now, that maybe doesn't mean a whole lot to us, but that's pretty significant in a patriarchal society. Father and mother. Now, there's other places where Scripture does that. Proverbs 1 verse 8 says, "Listen, my son, to your father's instruction, and do not forsake your mother's teaching." Wow, that looks like some of that stuff is both parents are doing that. Leviticus 19 verse 2 says, "Speak to the entire assembly of Israel and say to them, be holy, because I, the Lord your God, am holy. Each of you must respect his mother and father." Notice the mother comes first here. "And you must observe my Sabbaths. I am the Lord your God." Right? It suggests that both are equal as parents and both require the same honor. And that Leviticus passage, it does it in the context of speaking about the honor due to God. And so we honor father and mother. And then we want to touch on the aspect of the commandment about living long. Obviously, that is not a guarantee. All right, it's not a guarantee. Not everybody lives long, even if we honor our parents. Kevin DeYoung, in his treatment, suggests it is not about a long life, but more about an abundant quality of life, which may also lengthen your life, because a good predictor of health in adulthood is what happens in the home. So if we honor our parents, it makes for a healthy environment. Long life is not so much about, and another aspect is that long life is not so much about the individual person, but rather about the community. When parents are not honored, that community begins to experience chaos and it disintegrates. Honoring parents benefits the whole community, makes it healthier, and with health, we live longer. Well, let's look yet briefly at the Heidelberg Catechism, Lord's Day 39, question and answer 104. What is God's will for you in the fifth commandment? And the answer goes like this: that I honor, love, and be loyal to my father and mother and all those in authority over me, that I submit myself with proper obedience to all their good teaching and discipline, and also that I be patient with their failings, for through them God chooses to rule us. Now, the Catechism puts a special emphasis on the issue of authority. And it broadens it to include other forms of authority, not only parents, but things such as government. Now, the goal of authority is to cultivate order and maturity, to allow society to function well. At least it should be. It's not always that way, but it should be. Parents, government, teachers, leaders try to do that. They're meant to serve and care for others so that they develop and become better people, able to live independently, in community, and to be fruitful to society. These people are placed there, by the way, by God to carry out this task. Now, the Belgian Confession, Article 36, especially addresses this in dealing with civil government. But we who find ourselves under such authority should do our best to honor those in authority. They've been placed there by God, they're placed there for our good, and we should honor them. And when that happens, we may live longer, and it will go well for all in the land, in the world, the Lord our God gives to us. Well, that's it on this commandment. Thank you for listening, and, may God be with you.